Welcome back to another episode of the Educational AD Podcast. We'll be right back with today's guest, but first let's hear from our podcast sponsors. We want to thank Violet Defense for their support of the Educational AD Podcast. Violet Defense is dedicated to protecting our world from germs by bringing the power of UV disinfection to everyday spaces. Their patented technology enables them to harness the power of the sun to incorporate ultraviolet light into products and environments like never before. Whether you're ready to implement some of their existing products, or if you'd like to explore researching and developing a custom deployment of their technology for your school, Violet Defense has the solutions and the experience you need. Go to violetdefense.com for more information about their great products. We also want to thank Sideline Interactive for their support. You know, it's becoming harder and harder to fund an athletic department these days. But Sideline Interactive's indoor scoring tables and video boards can generate $10,000 or more every year while creating excitement in the gym and the ultimate game day experience for your student athletes. Go to sidelineinteractive.com or call them at 832-786-0302 to schedule a live web demo and see their tables and boards in action. You can also email them at sales@sidelineinteractive.com for more information. That's sales@sidelineinteractive.com. You need to check them out. I promise you, you will come away very impressed. We also want to thank Wall of Fame by Vital Signs. You know, they are on a mission to bring your school's legacy to life. They provide a variety of interactive touchscreen video consoles along with an extensive library of templates to make it easier than ever to recognize the athletic achievements of your students, both past and present. For more ideas on how to recognize your school's diverse history and showcase your proudest moments, go to vitalsignswalloffame.com. Or to learn more and get started with your own digital Wall of Fame tribute, call them at 614-981-3589, or you can email them at sales@vitalsignswalloffame.com. That's sales@vitalsignswalloffame.com. We also want to thank Huddle for their support. Remember, at Huddle, we power sports. More than 180,000 teams, including some of the best in the world, use Huddle to elevate the performance of their teams and their athletes using video and analytics. Huddle's the complete performance platform. They have online tools, mobile and desktop apps, smart cameras like the Huddle Focus. Of course, there's analytics and a whole lot more. Huddle's built for every level of play, from club and youth teams all the way up through high schools and colleges, and even professional programs are using Huddle to improve the play of their teams. You're in pretty good company with over 6 million users, including most of your student athletes, a lot of their parents, and the coaches of the teams you're trying to get to recruit your kids. If you want to find out more about what Huddle can do for you and your program, or how your school can become a Huddle school, go to huddle.com and talk to their professionals. Remember, at Huddle, we power sports. We also want to thank our good friends at Hometown Ticketing, the leading digital ticketing provider to schools and colleges. You can learn more about what Hometown Ticketing can do for your athletic program by going to hometownticketing.com. Hometown Ticketing, simple and easy online ticketing. We also want to thank Athletic Surveys by Lifetrack for sponsoring the Athletic Director Toolbox segment of the podcast. Athletic Surveys by Lifetrack are a quick, easy, and affordable way for you to collect comprehensive data that allows you to evaluate and improve your entire athletic program. Athletic Surveys by Lifetrack also connects you to the 95% of the parents and the student athletes who really love your program, and it gives them a voice to help demonstrate the importance that a positive athletic experience has for them. Go to Athletic Surveys by Lifetrack and check out their testimonials, and then give them a call at 1-800-738-6466, or you can email them at info@athleticsurveys.com to get started. If you've never used a survey to take the pulse of your parents or your student athletes, you're really missing out on some important information. Talk to the pros at Athletic Surveys by Lifetrack and let them help you take your athletic program from good to great. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Educational AD Podcast. I'm really excited about this one. Our guest today is Jason Holzer. We had Jason, we spoke about him earlier in the season, but Jason is the co-founder of an organization called 4D Athletes. He's also a mental fitness coach. He's a best-selling author. We're going to talk about his book later on. And I'm just really excited about having him on the program today. Jason, welcome to the Educational AD Podcast.
Jake, thank you, man. It's great to be here, and I'm excited to join you today.
Okay, well, we're going to jump right into things. We always like to let our listeners have a chance to get to know our guests. So tell us a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, where you went to school and college, and kind of how your path has led you to, again, the creation of 4D Athletes.
Yeah, man, as a kid, I always loved sports. I playing it, watching it. I was that kid that watched the same Sports Center episode 10 times in the morning because I just love the highlights of it. And it was where I felt the most connected. Like if I had a ball in my hand, if I was on a field, on a court, I felt like I was at home. I felt like that was where I was supposed to be. And I grew up in a small town, about 800 people in the middle of Missouri, right near Jefferson City. And so, we had a decent amount of resources, but we didn't have a ton like if you lived in the big city, right? So I played baseball and basketball primarily. And then as I got older, I realized like, man, I really love like working in sports, but I ended up not being an athlete that I ever could play. So I got into coaching because I was like, well, how can I still stay involved with the sport? Even if my playing days are beyond me, So then I was like, well, I thought I could use my story, which is a lot of my book, also to help kids and help people realize like, hey, you know what? Sometimes life will throw you some curveballs, right? And how you adapt, how you respond to them will determine, how successful you are. And at 4D Athletes, we coined the phrase like teaching people how to win in the game of life, right? Because it's the scoreboard is one thing, which is great. We all love to win. But what does it mean to win in the game of life where you're happy and successful? So that's kind of a lot of my background and why I got into it, because I really felt like, we have this platform of sports that can teach so many things outside of sports that help us in all areas of our life.
Yeah, again, you mentioned the book, and we're just going to go ahead and jump right in. The title of the book for our listeners, Shattered by Suicide, Renewed by Resilience. Just a very powerful read for me. Go ahead and take our listeners into the book and how it's continues to impact your life and what you do with 4D Athletes.
Yeah, so I wrote it about a little bit over 2 years ago now, in the fall of 2019, and it's my story about I lost my dad to suicide whenever I was 17. And my dad was a blue collar worker. He was an electrician, and he was the last guy you would have thought that would have, taken his own life. I mean, he was a family man. He was funny. He worked hard. He was involved in the community. He volunteered. And so his death by suicide was a shock. Like it was like, came out of left field for me, especially me as a 17-year-old. 17-year-olds aren't the most observant anyways, right? We're kind of in our own, like, we're focused on what we need to do. I was working, I was going to school, doing all these kind of things. And May 8th, 2003, my life just shifted on a dime. And I had to find my new normal with the man that was my first coach, my first teacher, my first role model, gone. Like just at one day it was here, the next day it wasn't. And it took a while for me to understand, and I still don't fully understand why, but coming to grips with the fact that I lost my dad to suicide. And it's one thing to lose a parent, like car accident, that kind of thing. But suicide takes a whole nother level of complexity, of grief, of forgiveness on my part, of healing, that it took me a lot longer to accept that fact. But when I finally did, that was when I felt like I could write a book to help other people, because suicide is just becoming more and more of a problem in our society. It's the second leading cause of death between 10 to 34-year-olds. I'm like, we have to do something to develop our mentality to make it healthier. So that way people feel like their lives have value. And so that was a lot of the reason behind it. It's my story of as a 17-year-old, what I went through, and then into my early 20s, mid 20s, and what I am now, and the things I did to be resilient, to overcome it, and believe that I still have a good life ahead of me, even though the trauma I experienced at 17.
Yeah. Again, we kind of connected on LinkedIn, and saw your book and got it. And as I mentioned, just very powerful. We don't recommend a lot of books here on this podcast, but this is certainly one I think you need to add to your library and your toolbox. We'll do this again later, but Jason, how can our listeners get a copy of your book? Where can they find it?
Yeah, I mean, if you just search the title and my name on Amazon, it comes right up. So that's the best place, especially since I self-published on Amazon, because for me that was the quickest route to get my story out. Because as somebody that's a new author, I'm lucky to have that tool, because otherwise there's a lot more hoops you got to jump through. So it's on it. It's Amazon's your best place to find it. Yeah.
Okay. For our listeners, we're visiting with Jason Holzer, the co-founder of 4D Athletes and the author of Shattered by Suicide, Renewed by Resilience. We're going to be back with some more, but first, let's take a quick break and hear from one of our podcast sponsors. We want to thank Sideline Interactive for their support of the Educational AD podcast. It's becoming harder and harder to fund an athletic department these days. With Sideline Interactive's indoor scoring tables and video boards can generate $10,000 or more every single year, while also creating excitement in the gym and the ultimate game day experience for your student athletes. Go to sidelineinteractive.com or call 832-786-0302 to schedule a live web demo and see their tables and boards in action. You can also email them at sales@sidelineinteractive.com for more information. You've heard me say that we have a Sideline Interactive video score table in our gym, and it's fantastic. It's a tremendously versatile tool. So once again, reach out to them at sales@sidelineinteractive.com. I promise you, you will come away very impressed. Hey, we're back with Jason Holzer, the co-founder of 4D Athletes and best-selling author. Jason, we always like to ask our guests about the mentors that they've had in their life. Nobody gets to where they're at on their own. There's always at least one person helping them. So who are some of the mentors that you've had in your life that have helped you along the way?
Yeah, man, I've had so many of them. But there was one guy in particular who he's a high school football coach, kind of by where I grew up. And at the time, he was a young athlete when I met him. It was right before my dad had passed, and little did I know how influential he would be afterwards. Because the one thing I did do was I've always been a man of faith, and I believed that that God always had your back, right? And so I prayed. I was like, "Hey, God, I need mentors. I need people to bring the right people in my life to help me out." And one of those guys is his name was Tim Rulo, and he just listened. He didn't try to fix anything. And that was the cool thing about him being a mentor, was he didn't understand where I was coming from, but he had the empathy to listen. And that helped me kind of get on the right path of man, I really want to be kind of like that guy. I want to be like how he interacts, how he engages with people. And so from him, I learned that people matter and that listening matters, so, and then there was my co-founder, Jim. I met him when I moved to Kansas City. I really want to be a great basketball coach. And he was one of the best in the city. He was in the Nike Global Challenge. He's coached 70 Division I players. A couple of players have made it to the NBA. So he knows what he's talking about, right? And so I just try to surround myself with people like him. And then even some of my mentors I've never met. But, these days, you can learn from so many people. Google, YouTube, you name it. And people that are where you want to be, just kind of look at their path and see what they did and follow their habits. That's the cool thing about mentors is it's great to know them, but now you can have mentors that you maybe have never met, and you might meet them one day, but there's so much now you can learn from people that have gone in a similar path now that you can really choose anybody you want to be your mentor.
Yeah, that's such a great point. I've certainly, I would do the same thing. People that I have come across, online or in many different ways. I've never met them personally, but what they're doing, what they said, what they shared, certainly I would put in that mentorship category. Want to go back to the book for just a moment. Again, the book is, Shattered by Suicide, Renewed by Resilience. You really opened yourself up, really shared your heart. And there's so many great passages. I wish we could, had time to share them all with our listeners. But, one that, kind of spoke to me was the passage you say, victims lose, winners choose. Would you mind, sharing a little bit about that, with our listeners?
Yeah, when I wrote that, I wanted to, from a winning standpoint of like, you can still recover, you can still recruit, and you can still heal and move forward. And my point is, winners choose their path. Like winners choose how they, react to things. They choose their ability to handle their emotions. They choose their direction in life. They don't let other people like choose their destinations for them. They put themselves in situations that no matter what's going on around them, they are the choice of their destiny. And I think Viktor Frankl put it the best. Like he was the author of Man's Search for Meaning. He was in a concentration camp. His wife got murdered with his unborn son, and he still found meaning and he still found purpose, even though he went through some of the hardest times in life. And I'm reading a book right now called Hero on a Mission from Donald Miller. And he talks about that same thing. Like we can choose our destiny. We can choose the way we want to go. And I think it goes back to like when you start to learn what you're supposed to do in life, it has purpose, it has fulfillment, and you can choose that. Where victims kind of like they let other people like decide their future, they let other people make decisions for them, and then they wonder why they're not happy or fulfilled because they haven't taken control. They haven't strapped up their bootstraps and really decided like, hey, this is who I'm supposed to be, and then I'm going to go after it. So that's where I felt like winners choose their path because they know what resonates with them, they know what connects with them, and then they follow it.
Absolutely. A great message. We talked about the book. You can go to Amazon and find it. For the website, again, we'll do this at the end, but, what's your website address? People want to check out more about 4D athletes.
Yeah, it's 4dathletes.com. And we created it with the fact of like four dimensions, so that's what 4D stands for. Like we live in the sports world, we tend to live in one dimension often, which is the physical. Like we train our body, we train our skill sets, but very rarely do we, and this is getting better, but very rarely do we train our mind, like or our spirituality or the environment that we put ourselves in. So our thought is if we can get these four dimensions, in place, we're going to be healthier in mind, body, spirit, and then we're going to put ourselves in environments of success. So as we transition out of sports, playing, working in sports, you name it, we know that we're more than just sports. Like we're more than just athletes. We're more than just coaches. That's what we do. It's not who we are. So that strong sense of self-identity, which helps us transition and gets us excited about what's next, as opposed to like reminiscing on the glory days. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that happens all too often, but great stuff. 4dathletes.com. If you haven't checked it out, I encourage you to go there and then reach out to Jason, see what he can do for you and your program. We're visiting with Jason Holzer, as we said, 4D Athletes co-founder and author. We're going to be back with some more, but let's take another quick break and hear from another one of our sponsors. We also want to thank Huddle for their support of the Educational AD podcast. Remember, at Huddle, we power sports. More than 180,000 teams, including some of the best in the world, are using Huddle to elevate the play of their athletes and their teams using video and analytics. Huddle's the complete performance platform. They have online tools, mobile and desktop apps, smart cameras like the Huddle Focus. We've got a Huddle Focus camera in our gym, and our volleyball and basketball coaches just love it. Of course, there's analytics and a whole lot more. Huddle's built for every level of play, from the club and youth levels all the way through high schools and colleges. And even professional teams are using Huddle to improve the performance of their teams. You're in pretty good company with over 6 million users, including your student athletes, a lot of their parents, and the coaches of the college and university teams that you're trying to get to recruit your kids. You want to find out more? about what Huddle can do for you or how your school can become a Huddle school, go to huddle.com and talk to their professionals. Remember, at Huddle, we power sports. Hey, we're back with Jason Holzer, the founder of 4D Athletes. Jason, you certainly have a very wide background in sports and athletics. And this is the point in the podcast that we like to try and share best practices. So, what are some things that you've seen, maybe even things that you've done in your career that our listeners could benefit from? Do you have any best practices you can share?
Yeah, I mean, I really try to put systems in place that other people can follow. So that's the key, like being able to magnify yourself by, because at first I felt like I had to do everything, right? I had to get the gym set up, I had to get it tear down, I had to get the coaches set up, I had to, make sure everything was in place, and I was getting tired. It was exhausting. So I started documenting everything that I do, like in very systematic. So that way other people like, hey, you know what? Can you help me with this? I think the thing was delegate. So that way you don't burn out was what was my big thing. And then getting the community engaged, like asking for them, like their thoughts and ideas. And then one of the tools that I use is that I believe that everybody is at least 10% right. So no matter what idea they have, I'm like, oh, you know what I like about that idea is and then I say something that I like about the idea. Now I may not necessarily agree with the whole thing, but what it does is it makes people feel like they're heard. And whenever you get a community feel like they're heard and valued, then you get people that are willing to help you more because you feel like you've listened. They feel like they've listened to you. You've taken their input, because you and I know, Jake, everybody's got ideas and everybody think their idea is great, right? So if you could take the 10% of whatever idea that they have, you're like, you know what? I like that idea. And what I like about that idea is, and you share, it could just be one smallest thing. Those people, they walk away thinking like, oh man, he really did care about my opinion. He really does care about our program. He really does care about what I have to say, no matter how much sense it makes. And then you start building a reputation of somebody that really cares about not only the people, but the community as well. And that's how you get more people on your side and to help you build your momentum of the mission that you're trying to have as an AD, a coach, you name it, whatever it is, because people feel like they're heard.
Yeah, it's such an important point, for any leader in our world of athletics. There's, a coach that wants to do something and, it's probably focused on their sport and might not be the greatest fit for the entire program, but, great idea. You can find something within that suggestion, or again, the stream of parents that are coming in with their suggestions on how to, change or add to the program. I love that idea of, hey, you know what I like about that? I wish I would have had that a lot earlier in my career. Right?
Yeah, and it really helps you focus on what they're saying too. Because how many times have you're trying to be pulled like 40 different directions? Somebody wants to stop and tell you something, and if like, okay, I got to find a 10%. It helps you like, give that. It helps you be present with people because you have to listen. Otherwise, you just might give like a quick, response, and then like I don't even remember what they said, and all of a sudden, then they
Mhm.
come back to you later, and it's like, oh yeah, can you repeat what you just told me? Because so I think it also helps build presence, especially when you're working with young people too, like, 14 to 18-year-olds, they're going to say some off the wall stuff, or they're going to do some really crazy things. Right. And if you give them an opportunity to explain themselves and you kind of like share like, oh, can you tell me more? Right. I think that's another key one too, is like, hey, tell me more. Cause I know whenever I grew up, it was, administration and authority was like, hey, you do what I say, this is what I do. And,
Yeah.
which is very old school. And I think whenever we're moving away from that in our modern society, mostly kind of because we have to, the way the pandemic has shifted things, we have to be more inquisitive. We have to be more curious. We have to understand other people more. Otherwise, we're just going to be judging them and then we're going to get frustrated.
Yeah, absolutely. Really, really spot on for this generation. For listeners, we're visiting with Jason Holzer, the founder of 4D Athletes and best-selling author. We're going to be back with some more, but let's take another quick break and hear from one of our podcast sponsors. We also want to thank Vital Signs by Wall of Fame. They're on a mission to bring your school's legacy to life. They provide a variety of interactive touchscreen video consoles along with an extensive library of templates to make it easier than ever to recognize the athletic achievements of your students, both past and present. For ideas on how to showcase your school's diverse history, along with your proudest moments, go to vitalsignswalloffame.com. Or to learn more and get started with your own digital Wall of Fame tribute, call them at 614-981-3589 or email them at sales@vitalsignswalloffame.com. That's sales@vitalsignswalloffame.com. I promise you, you won't be disappointed. We're back with Jason Holzer from 4D Athletes. Jason, one of the questions we've been asking our guests recently revolves around this idea of toughness. Toughness is certainly an important component of athletics, and I like to say back when I was in high school 100 years ago, it was common for my coaches to say, come on, you got to be tough, or come on, you got to suck it up, Jake. And I think in the years since then, we've figured out better ways to maybe get that across. But how can a coach or a leader or an athletic director help kids to become tough while also being aware of and sensitive to the very real social emotional challenges that a Generation Z kid is experiencing? Do you have any advice for us?
Actually, we had.
I think we might have had some technical issues there. So, Jason, we've been asking our guests about this idea of coaching kids to be tough. So, the way I phrase it is, how can we do that? How can we coach kids to be tough while also being aware of and sensitive to the very real social emotional challenges that a Generation Z kid is experiencing? Do you have any advice for us?
Yeah, we actually had a guest on our podcast, and her name is Dr. Mena Ramos from the Global Ultrasound Institute, and they're doing some great stuff with sports medicine and technology. But she described toughness as the ability to be self-aware of when you can push yourself beyond your limits, but also when you can rest and recover. Like toughness used to be the oh, I can push through, I can get through it. But the problem is if a car that doesn't have any gas on it, doesn't matter how hard you push on the pedal, it's not going to go any farther. So I think we can teach our kids by teaching our kids self-awareness of, when are you going to be at your best? When do you need to take that break? But not taking too long of breaks where you get yourself out of a system. I think that is how we can teach our youth toughness the most, is self-awareness and knowing who they are, knowing when they need to, give a little bit more, knowing when they need a rest. This is like in games and practice, in their activities out of school, because, a lot of kids are playing year round. So I think that just self-awareness and being okay with telling people, no, I can't do this, or no, I need a weekend to recover, or, knowing when to be able to set boundaries for yourself. I think that's toughness, is being able to stand up for yourself, set those boundaries, but also be able to go to your coach, go to your athletic director, share what's going on with yourself. So that way they can also point you in the right direction. They might not be the person that can help you, but they might have the resources that can give you the assistance that you might need. So I think that's, in my opinion, that's what toughness is to me. Yeah.
Yeah, you covered a lot of ground there, which is great. But I think it all comes back to this idea of having a culture, where communication exists. The coach is communicating to the team, to the athletes. This is what we mean by tough, and the kids have the ability and the strength and the toughness to be able to have those conversations, with the coach. Very, very cool stuff. Thanks, appreciate you sharing that. Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Jason, this has been really cool for me to get a chance to talk to you again. I had a chance to be on your show a while back, but we're not done yet. We always like to wrap up with what we call the athletic director's toolbox. And we're going to take a quick break and hear from Athletic Surveys by Lifetrack, who sponsor our toolbox segment. But when we come back, I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you to send out a brand new athletic director, a brand new coach, but I'm only going to let you put 3 things in their toolbox. Stick with us, and we're going to find out what's going to go in Jason Holzer's athletic director toolbox when we come back. We want to thank Athletic Surveys for sponsoring the Athletic Director Toolbox segment of the podcast. Athletic Surveys by LifeTrack are a quick, easy, and affordable way for you to collect comprehensive data that allows you to evaluate and improve your athletic program. Athletic Surveys by LifeTrack also puts you in touch with the usual 95% of the parents and the student athletes who really love your program. And it gives them a voice to help demonstrate the importance that a positive athletic experience has for them. Go to Athletic Surveys by LifeTrack and check out their testimonials, and then give them a call at 1-800-738-6466 or email them at info@athleticsurveys.com to get started. If you've never used a survey to check the pulse of your parents or your student athletes, you're really missing out on some important information. Go to Athletic Surveys by LifeTrack and let them help you take your athletic program from good to great. All right, we're back with Jason Holzer of 4D Athletes. Jason, it's that time where we're going to ask what 3 tools would you put into a new athletic director or maybe a new coach's toolbox to help them have a successful debut?
Yeah, I might have a few more than 3, but number 1 is the people. And what I mean by that is people is like engaging your coaches and the adults, the people around you, and be vulnerable with them, like share with them your story, like let them get to know you, because the more they know you, the more they're going to be invested in you. And the second one is your players, right? So what can you do to make the player experience more enjoyable? And that goes like hiring the right coaches. That goes with, having those conversations with players, like about what they want, what they would look for, what they need. And then the third one is purpose, right? Why are you doing it? You got to have a strong why, because you and I know some days are going to be tougher than others. And it's that why, that purpose that can put you through it. And then passion. How enthusiastic are you? Do you believe with positivity? Do you look at the glass half full as opposed to half empty? Do you see opportunities in every challenge? That kind of thing. And then patience. Not everything happens when you want it to, but being able to allow it to happen when it's supposed to kind of gives you that ability to plan ahead and stay the course. Being patient, knowing when and having the right timing, I think is key. On maybe you have a great idea to make your programs better, but you got to make sure that you also learn the timing of things as well. And then of course, 40athletes.com can help your athletes become better people, win the game of life. And then my book as well is a goal to help really anybody understand like what a 17-year-old goes through whenever they have a traumatic experience, like losing a dad to suicide, and maybe some of the emotional roller coasters that kids might be going through. And I really wrote it to help people understand, like, hey, this is what I went through. I know people are going through similar experiences, but again, just to be relatable, and build that empathy muscle that can help us, transform kids' lives.
Those were all great tools. You managed to sneak in a couple extras there. I always love that. Good job. You mentioned the book, Shattered by Suicide, Renewed by Resilience. It's available on Amazon and your website, 4D Athletes. I'm sure there's a contact us on the website, but if somebody wanted to reach out and just pick your brain, do you mind giving out your email so they can get in touch with you?
Sure. Yeah. It's just my name, Jason Holzer, the number 6 at gmail.com. I picked the number 6 because Stan Musial, one of my favorite players growing up, Stan the man, learning from him as I, who he was. So Jason Holzer 6 at gmail.com is where you can find me.
All right. Jason Holzer, thanks so much for being on the podcast today. All the best moving forward.
Thank you, Jake, for having me. It was a great pleasure to be on the show.
You were wonderful. For our listeners, remember the Zoom recordings of our interviews are uploaded to the Educational AD Podcast YouTube channel. We appreciate you listening today. Come back again next time for another episode of the Educational AD Podcast. Finally, we want to thank our good friends from Hometown Ticketing, the leading digital ticketing provider to schools and colleges. You can find out more about what Hometown Ticketing can do for you and your athletic program by talking to the professionals at hometownticketing.com. Hometown Ticketing, simple and easy online ticketing.